Morning and welcome to this episode. I am once again covered in Pillow Fort Extraordinaire, so this will be one of the deep ones. I just posted on this Facebook group that I'm at. I won't mention it by name, but it is a singles group. It is for people of my age, the glacial age, the age of old as hell. So yeah, I posted if anybody else on that entire group writes anything online, and I posted a few of my stories and books that I've written and waiting for people to respond. So last time I posted there, I asked what happens when the speed of inflation is greater than the speed of light in an area localized to a massive black hole? Does the when the speed of inflation away from the center due to the expansion of space itself is greater than the speed of gravity falling towards the center at the speed of light, what then occurs? I posted this, and the responses were those of a bar full of random people if you ask that. So mocking to dumb mucking. So now I'm seeing if said forum contains anything of intellectual interest to me. If not, then I will have to migrate. But if it does, it will be interesting to see what others post while I'm doing this, and I won't be able to read them while I'm doing this. So once I get back there, I will read all the responses instead of responding automatically or being online while they write. I will let the conversation percolate. I like that word. It is a fancy word. So, to the topic at hand, homelessness. I thought I'd say a couple of things about it being in a condition where I would no longer consider myself homeless. I am living on a rental agreement in a for homeless people building, but it is still pretty private. But I cannot, for example, host a party in my room for people outside of this place. So I'm in between. I have been offered a single apartment, but the apartment I was offered, despite being brand new, was, I'm just gonna say it wasn't to my liking and leave it at that. So I am going to have to wait for a better offer. But because I have been offered it once, I would consider myself now no longer homeless, if that makes sense to you. A couple of things I need to say about homelessness. It is very rough in many ways, but not physically. Once you reach a certain point and your survival instinct kicks in, it is remarkably easy. It is just boring. And it goes on for days and days and days and days. But finding the appropriate rhythm, like to your movements, where to go at night, where to collect the little money, what to do, where to cook, where to put your animals and familiars and so on and so forth. All this work that takes time, but once it's figured out, it is very simple. In my city, 300 grams, that's about half a pound of meatballs. If you take them from the these will expire today but have not expired yet aisle of the supermarket, you will get them if you buy them after 9. If the store closes at midnight, if it closes before midnight, it will be some hours earlier than 9. But if you do get there at 9, you will be able to buy them at a 60% discount from their 75 cents half a pound of meatballs. Such are similar prices. Now, if you cannot find anything to do for money, no friend will hire you to weed whack. There will be no place to panhandle. You have no skills of playing the banjo and dancing. Then Even if you cannot get money by recycling bottles specifically, there are certain avenues in modern cities that can get you by. One of these is something that, to me, to say out loud, is somewhat against the Thieves Guild rule. But one of these items that you can do is go from ashtray to ashtray and collect high quality uh, cigarette butts. And you clean them, empty them, and only do this in dry, good weather. And you only buy those little rolling papers, and you can probably ask for a few of those from some of your homeless friends or bum them from somebody on the street. And once you have rolled like 10 of those tobaccos, go to somebody who looks kind of homeless and offer to sell the whole bunch to them for like $1. And you have a business. You are a producer, you are a manufacturer. Such jobs are city specific. And once you have acquired your city's money making route, in this city, it is returning and collecting bottles specifically. This is a method by which, on a normal day, if I have no money at the start of the day, if I go out and walk to the cheapest supermarket, which is about 2 miles away, during that walk alone, I will have noticed enough cans that I can, at that supermarket, buy 2 or 3 packs of meatballs, or 1 pack of meatballs and 1 can of energy drink. In every city, these are different, but every city guarantees you some method of making money as an absolute homeless person. Every city has the method by which homeless people, the rats, are expected to survive. It won't be glorious, but it'll get you by. Now, once you have that method figured out, you should figure out how much you can make if you put all your effort into that effort, and then do some math. How much do you need day to day to survive? How much can you save every day? How much are the laundromats, for example? How much is one hotel room for one night? Very often, if it is a port city, I will let you know that it is cheaper than hostels, hotels, or any kind of bed and breakfast place in a port city to rent a room in a boat at the cheapest level for a night. That is most often the cheapest possible form of sleeping. And that is something to keep in mind. Now, in most cases, you are entitled to some social security when you are homeless. There are countries that do not give you anything, but unless you are wealthy in some fashion, then almost universally all countries give you something. That something is not enough to rent or buy an apartment. And as soon as you buy an apartment, that vanishes. So you know you can't move to the poor part of the country and buy an apartment, because then you'll no longer be entitled to Social Security. So for the most cases, you need to live outside the grid when you are on Social Security. This is something I have talked about recently and have been planning to include in my campaign portfolio if I do campaign again. That people whose entire life savings plus property or something are at the bottom 10% of everybody, or something along those lines. I talked about having the savings of $10,000 total. That would allow you to buy a car to sleep in and still be entitled to Social Security. Something small, but 10%, the lowest 10% of legal citizens in a country entitled to Social Security, and their average savings amount sounds roughly appropriate. But since you are entitled to some amount, what you end up doing is budgeting your time. After a while of being homeless, one of the things you will realize that is that friendship that doesn't acknowledge your homelessness is more important than wasting them for the couple of nights you can get on their couch. Now, everybody should know of your friend circle that if they do have an apartment, if they do have an extra apartment, I mean, that they can rent, if they do have a job they need done, they can contact you, but you should in no way obligate them. Because one of the things you learn in homelessness is that the thing more valuable than being helped temporarily out of your homelessness, because it is most often the permanent reason is something relating to you and it can't be changed that easily. So temporarily getting you out of homelessness is not worth the damage to your permanent sense of self, of knowing people who are normal. So when you do get out of homelessness, you will not be strapped for somebody's ability, for example, to use their credit card if you pay them in cash for services that are only available to credit cards, which after you are on your own are surprisingly many. Like the normal human abilities of a friend to help a friend that doesn't extend to somebody who is acutely homeless, because that is a terrifying responsibility to place on anyone. But the normal things a friend can do to help a friend are, after your acute homelessness, very valuable. They are very valuable to you. Just the ability to show up well groomed and in good clothing to a public affair. I'm not talking about suit and tie. I'm talking about not smelling like shit and actually looking presentable and going to a movie, then possibly burgers and laughing and such. Because you may not realize it, but after you cross a certain threshold of homelessness, everybody in the city knows you. They know you. You are one of the icons of that city. This may not be the case for a city of 20 million, but of the people relevant to you in your circles of that city, they know you. You are an icon. They are aware of you. Now, the downside of this is that since they're aware of you and still not helping, you're on your own. There's only what can be described as the psychedelic state upon you. You are on a journey. The universe is guiding you. There is very little you can do because the society has been geared in a way that those of your alignment end up in this trouble. And there will be some deep psychological mark about you that ends up destroying you. You literally have the mark of the devil. And without mastering that, they cannot help you. It may be something as simple as a drug affair. You have an affair with drugs, and until you sort that particular affair out, there is no way of helping you. That might be the thing. It might be that you're gay in 1936 Germany. These things vary. So don't waste your friends. Don't waste them. There is a factor if you have a public life, which I recommend you maintain, like a Facebook, which documents your day to day, because once you get on your feet again, it will be invaluable for you to have that reminder, to know what you are capable of, to know how far you can be pushed and how far society can push back, and how even though you are afterwards deemed by yourself to be incoherent in those moments, because that will happen, because your mind will block that self out. You will appear incoherent to yourself. You will not have been because others have helped you. If you were completely incoherent, they wouldn't have helped you. So your mind tends to, after a great trauma, block the trauma out. This causes physical, biological disease manifestations upon you. So after you get out of your acute homelessness, be very, very aware that you're gonna have PTSD. PTSD isn't just feeling sad. It's literally trying to murder the part of you that remembers while keeping the part of you that doesn't remember alive. That is PTSD. It is literally, there is no other way to describe it than a part of you trying to murder another part of you due to that part being so alien to the normal self. Our human self literally grows an immune reaction to your crisis self. And once that starts to balance out and work itself out, you will start to feel very good and very home-like, but there will be a very deep-seated hatred. It will be beyond deep-seated. It will be Holocaustian hate. It will be total and complete disregard for society. Not hostility, disregard. You simply do not consider them anymore. You have living on the street become not trash, because trash is disposed of. You have become so completely invisible to humanity that once humanity, after you are on your feet, turns to you and says, these are the rules because you're rich. You know those rules don't apply to you because you've been poor. You've been in a region of life where those rules don't correspond to reality. But you know that they are the guys holding the guns at your head and telling you that because you have money now, these are the rules. And thus, a very deep disregard for society. Loathing denotes that you are angry at them. This is not it. You are not angry at society. You know that it is not society's fault. You have just a complete and utter disregard for them. You are like a person in crisis, and your only job in that said crisis is to get out alive. So you do not go around randomly in a crisis shoving people, but if somebody happens to be in your way, they're gonna get shoved. That is the nature of crisis. In some almost mythical cases, people in crisis don't shove each other. There are reports of some crises where everybody has been absolutely cool, calm, and collected, and that's why they got a few more people out. Those reports are available, but it is exceedingly rare for a crisis where people do not shove each other if they happen to be in the way. If there is something that helps them survive by that group that they bump into, then they will adjust to taking it in with maximum force. They will integrate that group, whether or not that group likes it. It will simply integrate it. That is crisis mentality. Once the crisis is over and you're at a place where the rules no longer apply to you again, except when you choose to interact with society inside those rules, then you will have been rich. So what you see here is poor, no rules because no money. Rich, no rules because can define an area where no rules applies with money. And the middle class, the people who have a gun to their head, and the gun is composed of because you think these are the rules. you have to pay this and this, the middle class. Now, because you've been as poor as anybody can be, you've been homeless, you have an acute understanding of why the middle class is bullshit. It is utter and complete bullshit. They live in a situation where you can be threatened because of your possessions, and thus have a different set of bullshits. The poor cannot be threatened by their possessions, only their lives. And so the rich are also able to do the same because they can take attributes of all groups that they encounter. So therefore, because you have been an icon of poverty in your city, the leeway they give you once you reach out of poverty is pretty extraordinary, because I have not been born poor. I only developed a certain habit. So I know. So that's the thing with like homelessness. I've talked with some military people here and there, lieutenants, captains, and people of this nature. I have also talked to the grunts, but I do not talk to them as much, sadly. I have talked to the military folk, and I have come to the following conclusion. Homelessness can be one-to-one calculated for military efficiency, the same as training for a soldier. That is the conclusion they have reached. If you have been homeless for 10 years, it can be calculated that you've been in the army for 10 years when it comes to the art of killing people. This has come from people who have been both very long in the military, both active and passive, as in active and reserve, and have been homeless, from people who have been in both categories. They report that in the art of war, killing, if you will, barring some super specific case of one device specifically needing to be the device used, you know what I mean, you will be able to equate the efficiency in the art of killing of a soldier as to the same level as a homeless person of that time. These are the people who served in Afghanistan saying. They are literally saying every mujahideen is the same as a soldier, and every homeless person is a mujahideen in Afghanistan terms. And when you go to a country that's 95% rubble, then you are going to a country that's 95% mobilized. The US had 3 million active soldiers, and the Afghanis had a population of around 30 million. Let's say 25 million of those can be considered soldiers. US did good. The logistics kind of didn't notice the situation. The Japanese surrender is an interesting one. Now, from the Japanese point of view, this is gonna take a little bit of history. They have two styles of government which have fought a war amongst themselves for the last 1,500 years. The other is the military government, the shogun, and the other is the emperor. Whenever the emperor is in rule, the country is expected to be pacifistic. Whenever the shogun's in rule, the emperor is expected to be so over-the-top militaristic that everybody knows the shogun's in rule. Now, when the Japanese initially sent their surrender offer at the end of the Second World War, they said that they'll allow anything except killing the emperor specifically. That's after the talk was over. And the US said that they'll require unconditional surrender. Now, the emperor, being the guy of peace, said that he'd rather get shot than have essentially the Mongols invade mainland Japan from their mythos, the guys from the boats over the sea. Has happened a few times. And the military basically said no, because it was the shogun in charge. And this developed in the palace intrigue. This happened in the early 45s, late 44s. And this developed in the palace intrigue. The emperor talked with his staffers, the military guys. He tried to figure out if it's possible to actually do a coup against the government. He had a little powwow. Much of this is just my hypothesis, but most of history is just guys' hypotheses. That's good about history. And the emperor found out that no, he doesn't have the power, which is kind of in line with their mythos, to stop the military once the military has been unleashed. So the emperor basically found out that if somebody comes to the region of the emperor's power, which is the phase of isolationism, and tells them to expand uncontrollably, and then doesn't like almost immediately end the expansion, like lets it continue for at least a little while, then the emperor is in no way able to control it after it has begun. And that is what fits their mythos. So they didn't surrender, and the emperor didn't do a coup. Then, about 6 months after the peace offer, the initial peace offer was sent, and the Japanese were losing even more, the Americans dropped the atomic bomb, and the emperor had a powwow with the generals. And the generals basically told him that they only have one. And the emperor was like, that's my understanding of the general mood at that moment. Because being somewhat of an educated guy, unlike these military guys who were basically very good soldiers, he knew that once you develop something, like anything, you can use it again. Like, that's basically common sense to like you and me. So if you have something and you use it, there's a very high probability that if you want, you can use it again. You do not make singular shows of force. You do not detonate your entire nation randomly at no cause forever, if you will. So he basically listened to these generals and recorded some surrender notes publicly. Made a recording to be played in the case of Japanese surrender. Now, he wasn't at that point surrendering, he was just making a record of it, just like practicing, making like a practice speech. And this was in combination with a rumor that he was going to surrender after the first atomic bomb, would lead to basically a palace coup by the dropping of the second atomic bomb, which is about a week later. The Japanese generals basically foretold that the emperor was going to surrender, which the emperor at that point was, as far as I know of, not going to do. He was going to wait for the generals' reaction to if they drop a second atomic bomb, which they did. So this kicks off a palace coup, roughly the first stirrings of it before the second atomic bomb against the emperor. And after the second atomic bomb, when the generals and the emperor kinda sorta don't meet. They do meet, as far as I know, but they kinda don't. And the palace essentially decides at that point that their only chance is to scream for help and jump to the US as a nation against the shogunate. So basically, the emperor calculates that if he's lucky, the Japanese people feel roughly the same, that they would prefer, as a general rule, more of a peaceful life than a militarist life. If they really do want to fight to be the shogunate, then the Americans are very unlikely to succeed in their landing. That is a military fact. That is Operation Sea Lion. It is basically your doom. You cannot do it. Now, the Americans can be led to believe that it's a good idea and they can be made to land, and it will be an absolutely horrific bloodbath. But the emperor calculated that if he takes his personal guard, broadcasts the signal to the entire state from single location that has radio access with his personal guard overtaking the local guards at only that location and only for that signal, there is a very good chance that the Japanese population as well as the American population will hear it. And that will mean that if the generals do actually do a coup, then the emperor is no longer supporting them, which means that the average commoner will not fight in the front. They will not take a bamboo stick and run at the Americans. As long as the emperor tells them to do that, there's like 50 million soldiers. It's going to be Afghanistan, but on the Second World War number level. And if that support is withdrawn, there's only the professional army, which is 1.5 million troops. And that is hard to take if it fortifies a single position. But against a low-level civil war and the population, as soon as the Americans land openly in the American-controlled region, support it and just state emperor, end of discussion, then the Americans will probably win, but it will mean the destruction of the Japanese military, and thus the balance between these two systems where, the most logical one wins. And he calculates that he is unlikely to survive, but he will do that anyway. And this happens after the second atomic bomb. And he does indeed manage to take over something that can be described as a radio station against the local guards with his, what I would at that point to be very peculiar about why these guys weren't killed, the imperial family. Everybody who at the point where the emperor was walking from his usual private cabinet, which is where this guy is, he doesn't travel, He's kept as a symbol. He's moved perhaps from a city to a city, but during wartime, he's kept at a single location. He gathers his personal guard, which, due to the nature of the shogunate and the era, is basically composed of the imperial family, and tells them that they're going to take a room and hold it, and then just starts walking. He gets to the place, sends the broadcast out, and there's a rather sizable firefight with the local military, which the Japanese honor guard actually wins, which is, in a historical sense, very peculiar, because it was the military actually attacking them. And I believe this is because the soldiers on the field heard that they were actually shooting at the emperor as Japanese, and they basically didn't want to do it. If it's just 100 guys running into one office building with the emperor on the phone with the Americans surrendering, he's gonna get shot. But he managed to get together his personal honor guard, which consisted of the royal family, the guys with the swords, with the very few exceptions who kind of sort of were dicks, very badly, or were very, very responsible, not just in the royal family. Those guys almost all got shot in the trials afterwards. The particular core family survived. None of them got Nazi'd by the Americans afterwards. even though some of them were very horrific criminals in war terms. Simply because during the end fighting, this isn't talked about much in history, but during the end fighting, the guys that were part of the honor guard were basically the ministers, staffers, guys walking the hallway, honor guard. And they managed to basically knock out like 2 guys and send the broadcast. The Japanese army heard them, stormed the palace, and tried to like take it with like absolute numerical superiority, and they just fought them off until like the Americans basically responded by sailing to Tokyo Harbor. And I'm like, what? You know, I don't recall what the exact U.S. answer to the Japanese was, but I do recall that the honor guard fought them off until the Japanese message was truly sent and the American response was truly sent. I believe that is the case. Then they signed the surrender documents on that U.S. battleship. A couple of Japanese guys get sent to the Western courts to be summarily hanged. You know, stuff like that. Basically, if it's controlled by the isolationist party, then it's pretty good. But if something forces them to hand control of their society to the expansionist ideology, then the results are almost always bad. It's a nation that should be kept content. Not like perhaps happy, but content. Drugs and alcohol, and very many flashing lights. Good food. Lots of hot saunas and baths. You know, content. We shouldn't bother them to be awoken. I'm saying that as if EU is China and UK is Japan. Don't bother them. Antaa niiden nyt oikeasti olla. Ne on sanonut, että ne lähtee, niin ne lähtee. Ei sitä aleta tekemään vaikeaksi. Jos te teette sen vaikeaksi, niin mä lyön koko EUn ihan läskiksi. Puola saattaa ehtiä tehdä ennen mua. Se menee ihan läskiksi. Jos te teette siitä EUsta lähtemisestä vaikeaa, niin mä voin sanoa, että mä tuun vittu panssariautoon keskelle Brysseliin. Sanoin, että mitä te sanoitte siitä, että noin saa lähteä? Sitten sitä ongelmia tässä neuvottelussa. Meneekö se aikaa? Mikä tää on tää juttu? Kaiutan sen kaikkien läpi, jotka on vähänkään samaa mieltä. Totta kai mäkin haluan, että EU:ssa pysyisi kaikki ja se olisi kaikkien kanssa kivaa. Ja etenkin, että Iso-Britannia pysyisi siinä, koska vittu mä en kestä sitä, jos Englanti lähtee tästä kulttuurista. Tästä tulee ihan vitu pelleilyä. Sitten kun meillä ei ole sitä vahvaa kulttuurisidosta Englantiin, niin se satojen vuosien kuluessa valuu semmoiseksi, että kummallakin oma kieli. Se ei ole yhtään hyvä juttu. Sitten meillä on kummallakin taas eri latina. Teillä on joku vaikka Sea Latin ja meillä on Coast Latin. Sitten se on taas kahtena. Sitten menee vähän aikaa, kun se heiluu tällainen. Sitten siihen tulee taas yksi, kun se kyselee itseltään, että mikä menee mihinkäkin. Sitten kun se loppuu se laskuteho siltä biomassalta, niin sitten se vaan alkaa laskea isompia ja isompia klustereita ja sitten sen kuolee jengi. Sitten kun se on väsynyt se biomassa, yhdistelee vaan isompia semmosia, että se sopisi nopeasti kasaan. Sitten kun se on valmis, niin lähtee siitä. Ei sillä ole mitään kiinnostusta. Eikö se ole mielenkiintoista, että Franklin Delano Roosevelt kuoli joku 3 päivää toisen maailmansodan jälkeen. Vittu se oli väsynyt. Se oli sellainen, että nyt kun pääsee lepäämään, niin ei missään tapauksessa, jos on sota loppunut, niin pitäisi antaa ilman jotain oikein hidasta adrenaliinitippaa, niin mennään edes nukkumaan. Siinä on niin korkealla, niin pitkään käynyt se adrenaliinitaso, että jos se loppuu kuin seinään, niin mä sanon, että pumppu räjähtää ihan 100% varmuudella. Se on ihan saletti juttu. Ja sitten silloin, kun käy sotaa, niin jos ei vaikka parin kuukauden välein pidä semmoista pari viikkoa ihan, että menee vaan lomalle, niin sitten se päästä. Niistä päätöksistä tulee niin huono, ettei siinä ole mitään järkeä. Siinä vaiheessa, kun Churchill sanoi, että meidän pitäisi nyt hyökätä Neuvostoliiton kimppuun, niin mä oon sillä että lääkkeet! Nyt hiljaa, äijä. Olen nyt vittu paikalla, saatana. Vittu ihan oikeesti. Kato tuota 1860-2020 military spendingin YouTubesta. Haluatte siinä vaiheessa käydä Neuvostoliiton kimppuun vai? Niillä on joku 25 miljardia, kun Yhdysvaltain sotateollisuus on joku 500 miljardia siinä vaiheessa. Käyt ihan huviksesi vetää turpaa sitä siviiliarmeijaa, joka tappeli sun puolesta. Oot nyt ihan vittu hiljaa. Eikö nyt kaikki katsoo sitä, että mitä kaikilla Saksa-alueella tapahtuu. Ketään muuta ei kiinnosta mikä. Jos joku sanoo jotain, niin sanotaan, että hiljaa. Katsotaan nyt vaan sitä Saksaa. Me tehdään tuonne Itä-Saksaa sillä lailla, että me laitetaan niin vitusti teollisuutta. Koska tuossa Ruuri-alueella on tommonen, jos ne aina alkaa tappeleen, niin hilataan tää teollisuus tänne itään vittu. Se on niin kuin meidän ensimmäinen juttu. Katsotaan mitä te teette. Ai te teette paljon sillä lailla, että se lähtisi siviilinä käyntiin. Okei, no tää on selvä juttu vittu. Hyvä vittu. Katsotaan mitä meillä on 100 vuoden päästä taas vittu. Hohoja. Ei kun vittu oikeasti, se on se kansakunnan ydin. Se on oikeasti se kansakunnan ydin. Ja kato sitä, mikä on Euroopan linguistinen kartta, minkä takia mä sanoisin. Hiljaa vittu. Sorry, I'm talking Finnish. A lot of guys here in Finnish. There's like a thing about it. I may continue in Finnish. It's not a sorry thing because half of my audience is Finnish. But it's... Vittu, toi on ollut junissa koko päivä. Oh. I was on the shoulder. Ow. Huh. The human body is developing the following organ: a apparatus about yay big, somewhere in the very, very, very low neck or upper shoulder, most likely between the upper two most shoulder blades, which consists of a large enough brain and a whatever apparatus that if the head truly gets so severely damaged that keeping its functions alive kills the host, and you can determine that it is the head, that organ takes over. There is no secondary function. The head will simply consist. This will guarantee two things: dissociation from large traumas, meaning that you know that even without your involvement, your body would survive. And the fact that primary decapitation will no longer kill a normal, healthy human. That following organ is being developed, I'm pretty sure. This makes for a great zombie movie. Very sure. Okay. That's my advice on homelessness. Moving on.